Welcome back, fellow armchair generals. This is Gamer1745 here with my continuing playthrough of Hearts of Iron 3 and Black Ice 8. Okay, just a quick little update from my special about the American political situation in the current time. My understanding that it has, though I may be wrong, could be an internet hoax, but I don't believe so. I believe it is a real supported element of Donald Trump, the real Donald Trump, the Lions Guard of Donald Trump. Okay, guys, there's now an organization called the Lions Guard of Donald Trump. Their slogan is, "Better to be a lion for the day than a lamb for eternity." They're there to protect. They're organizing themselves up to protect Trump at rallies from protesters attacking him. That sounds like something like the Sturmabteilung, or SA, or SA as the Americans would know it better. Maybe sort of kind of does sound that way. Maybe not. Maybe I'm, it's up to you to decide, but it sort of kind of sounds like that organization. It does sound something like that, and I think it did start before, and this time they're now political people referring to Trumpism instead of republicanism, and sort of the fight between republicanism and Trumpism. Some of the republicanism types, or most of those types, are what we'd normally call the establishment, sort of the republicanism group. Then there's the constitutionalists. They've also trying to take over the Republican Party. The constitutionalists are headed by Ted Cruz and Senator Ted Cruz and Senator Mike Lee. Those are the two primary movers on the constitutionalist movement, trying to take over the Republican Party, but Trumpism. And I think, again, the policies are in many parts different, but the distrust of foreigners, the nationalism, some of those parts are the same as Hitlerism, as the Nazis were originally sort of referred to as Hitlerism. Is just interesting parallels. That's all we need to say at the moment. Just interesting parallels. Okay. Before we got going, I wanted to show you this. Here we go. Here's a little bit of a look inside the U.S. We've got an armored division moving north up to, presumed to Portland. Maybe it's going to go on, because last episode we saw that we have some Canadian armor up here guarding what's left of Britain's occupation there. So, and these are mostly, well, corps with that looks like a some sort of motorized division there. And so we got some more stuff here guarding the coast up in Boston, but that armored division's moving north, so that's a reaction to something that's going on that the AI is understanding. So just seeing how things are reacting to what we're doing and our plans. Okay, just moved a large group of units over to Britain. We first give, rewards for being a German soldier. After, of course, the Eastern Front and all of that, you get a time in Paris along the French coast here. And then for, holidays there, then we moved you over to Britain to getting holiday sightseeing in Britain before sending you back into the meat grinder over to the United States. Okay, one of these here is this one with a commander with an Arctic specialist. We're just going to take the time and send them all the way up to here to rebase temporarily, but because whether at this time or sometime in the near future we'll move into basically all the troops that are there out, because we're not going to leave them in Greenland. Okay, mud starts to clear. Okay, well. Let's put these guys patrolling here. And behind them we're going to invade Trinidad. But not Tobago. Tobago's the island that's not shown on the map here. We'll see if the Turpits can beat out. Is it the War Spite or something like that? Okay, grand battle plan has advanced. So devising things like the Schlieffen plan have gotten better organized and trained for the German army. Mass assault, okay. Do that one. And carrier task force, unfortunately, we won't get the, have to push too far forward to get the strategic effects at this time. It's screwed up, though I know later versions they fixed it. Nav tactics have advanced. Let's see. What that goes to back in 39, so. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. Canada is storming our beach. Okay. And that was going to be my next sort of garrison move, and I probably should even move. Move it beforehand. Before I did the Greenland assault. Okay, we've won Trinidad. We can take this back, but ooh, this is a well escorted with destroyers. What does Romania want? Yes, you can have energy. Okay, camouflage designs. As I believe I've said before, the German army, before the war, did have camouflage design, a decent one, but they didn't, it wasn't very widespread to my knowledge, based primarily upon original source material of photographs, though I do believe I've seen a few pre-war photographs using the sort of tent slash poncho thing that they did in a few photos of helmet covers when in the camo, but it was seems to be very rarely used. And actually the Waffen-SS was made fun of a bit by the army at the start of the war for its much wider use of camouflage designs. Actually, I don't know if it's, well, and later as the war goes on, Germany uses more and more camouflage materials. I'm sort of, because it's the infantry here, I'm presuming that this is not camouflage designs is talking about poking brush in your helmet, but maybe that's what they're talking about. patterns of uniforms. Actually, the Waffen-SS pattern of camouflage was very advanced. If you look at it, and then you compare some degree the modern digicam of the American Army and the sort of digicam type modern stuff of the Bundeswehr, including the sort of previous Bundeswehr stuff, which was quite honestly based on the Waffen-SS camouflage pattern. But the more digicam, because they found that the way the eyes see things, that if you do the sort of digital breakup of it at a distance, it blurs the target that you're looking at better. And this is one thing that people have often sort of teased about people wearing camouflage, that you can see them clearly and they're not really hidden. Now, camouflage comes from the French, which I guess means to hide or whatever. It comes out of World War I believe is the first significant use of the word camouflage. The purpose of camouflage for a soldier to wear it primarily, as well as like the dazzle pattern, if you've seen on the ships, starting also in World War I, where they have weird geometric shapes on them, sometimes fairly brightish colors, wasn't to hide their presence. It wasn't, oh, we can't see them. Yeah, if they're sort of in the bushes, yeah, if they're laying still, the camouflage may keep them from being seen. But that's not its primary purpose. The primary purpose is to break up the outline of the ship, the tank, the person. And so your eye will normally pick up movement pretty easily, because humans are at least partly predators. So they pick up the movement. And so they see that they're there, but to target them effectively and to identify like how many there are in a group, if you see a bunch of them moving, are there 4 of them or are there 24 of them, kind of thing, if they're sort of clumped up and there's trees and other things, not like hiding behind, but just sort of in between you and them a bit. It breaks up their patterns, and so you don't have distinctive targets. It's harder to accurately target them rapidly. That is really what camouflage in the uniform does it rather well if done. And like I say, the Waffen-SS stuff is very similar to the modern digicam, although it is not the digicam blocks, and I actually think the blocks help break it up at sort of the distance. They're military uniforms are fashion. That is an absolute fact. You can look, particularly starting in World War II, I think it was a conscious effort to make the United States soldier look stupid. I can't readily imagine from sometime in 1940, 41, through to 2000 something, the United States Army High Command has done everything it can to make the United States soldier look stupid. If you look at all the dress uniforms, you know that ugly green uniform, they pick the ugliest green color you can possibly find on the planet. They do ugly badges, ugly tailoring, not just as in how well it's tailored, but in the cut and style. They just, like, if you put up 25 examples of military uniforms around the world, the ugliest one will be the United States uniform. So we have had the ugliest uniform that we can possibly come up and possibly convince people to wear. The dress uniform, now if you're not aware of this, Europe and other places, or Americans, the semi-dress walking out uniform of the United States Army is no longer green. They have abolished that. They have gone back to the traditional American color of blue, as in Union blue from the American Civil War. but because they realized that the sort of pseudo dress uniform that was sort of used in World War II had better colors then, but wasn't ever going to be in a combat situation, so why try to hide? So they went back to the Army Blue, and so they're getting better on it. This is why I say I forget the official year of changeover, but it's been intensely ugly, the worst possible cuts, the worst looking. Don't know why. Don't know whether it's just they get the colorblind guy to do it, or the most nerdy guy who likes the most nerdy looking clothes to be the fashion coordinator or something. I don't know what it is, but the U.S. Army has done bad in the fashion. So military uniforms are fashion. Don't let anybody fool you on that. And another sort of evidence is we've gone over to the Digicam for the U.S. Army, or U.S. Armed Forces generally speaking. For a while, the Army was trying to do a universal pattern that would work everywhere, that basically ended up working nowhere well. The U.S. Army also has a fetish, unlike the British, who on the regimental system will have a riotous amount of dress uniforms if you show up anywhere just about, because each guy's dressed in his own regimental uniform, or each regiment has its own beret type and everything else. The U.S. Army loves uniformity. That's another thing that the U.S. Army hated, that the Green Berets got to wear a beret. They hated it. It was just sort of a fashion that was unofficial, and officially you couldn't do it, but the Green Berets sort of did it until John F. Kennedy showed up at, I think it was Fort Bragg, where the headquarters of the U.S. Special Forces, and a bunch of the soldiers wore the Green Beret, and they got, because of that visit, they got a presidential permission, because he's commander-in-chief, to wear the Green Beret, and they became known as the Green Berets. The Army hated that, partially because they didn't like the Special Forces, partially because they went around chain of command. They hated it. So then once they did that, they allowed initially the paratroopers to have a red beret and the Rangers to have a black beret. And that was just because, again, those units were pushing it, but they still disliked it. So what did they do eventually? Made everyone wear a black beret so that no one was special, so that everyone had the black beret. So the Rangers had to change theirs to a beige beret. So your color beret could change, but now everyone has a beret because we are an army of one, and we're all super special, and no one's better than anybody else, and we're all equal, and it's all this BS Army stuff. Yes, I do have some connections to the Army. And so that's very much the Army idea, is everything the same. Well, they found that the sort of original Digicam, like I say, didn't work well anywhere, so they've come out with some a jungle pattern, forest or European sort of pattern, a desert pattern, and whatnot. Well, in this new Digicam phase, the United States Navy now has a blue and sort of black Digicam. Why? Why in the hell would you do that? If you're on land, if you're a U.S. naval soldier naval person who's on a small boat unit that's operating in Iraq, if you're on the boat, they see the boat, you should probably, it's the boats that's going to be seen, not the people. And when you're off the boat, you should probably be wearing desert camo. And if you're operating against, guerrillas in the Philippines, when you're off the boat, that's probably when your camouflage is going to work. Why would you want to look like a piece of the ocean in the middle of the green? Why? When you're on a base in the United States, why do you want to look like a piece of the ocean? Why? I don't get it. Now, we are going to low visibility ships that, at least for most of the time in combat, unlike World War II, if not, and I say most of the time because you do have damage control parties, most of the time in combat, there will be nobody on deck anymore. Everybody will be under you know, I don't know whether you call it under armor, but inside the superstructure. So you're not going to be seen, I don't think. So I don't think the point of this digicam is to hide you while you're on ship. I don't think it is. Now, okay, so, but if you're wearing the digicam on land, the sort of the blue hides you pretty well, at least to my perception of most of the ocean that I've seen. But doesn't hide you very well on the land. I mean, if you're hiding in the shadows, well, fine, you're already in the shadows. Why not just do a sort of a green thing? So if you're like a seal or some other riverine force, or just your standard, there was a lot, and I knew a couple post the war, just because of my age. There were a lot of sailors serving in Vietnam that were, some of them were on the riverine forces. I knew one guy who was doing that. But there were major ports that had major naval contingencies on them. Some of them were wearing sort of what you would expect. I know I'm going off on another rant here. You would expect sort of the navy blue. But then they also had the sort of tan colored uniform, sort of for tropical, that came out of World War II. And the Navy does better than the Army normally on the fashion. And so that there were a lot of those types of people, service people, that were also wearing green, just because they were on the base and the bases were being shot at and they wanted to be low visibility. You know, it's that. They weren't combat soldiers. They may have had a rifle, but that was just to defend themselves on the base. It wasn't that they weren't combat. These weren't. And so that we can be seeing that again in the future. Okay, so, but why give them sea hiding ability? Now, why are they doing this? I presume it's because since everybody else is getting new digicam, the Navy has to get new digicam, and so they made it Navy-looking digicam instead of looking like the Marine Corps digicam, or because you can't look the same as Marines, whether the Marines object to it, probably, or the Navy just wants to look different. But that's part of it. We've got to collect these guys. I'm sure that's part of it, to look different. So it's mainly fashion. But the one thing that I saw completely wrong with it is, what if you fall off ship? I remember, 10 years ago or more, a Marine fell off of, I think it was a carrier. And they're trained to actually take their pants off and tie the end of the legs, and this sort of the tight stuff sort of kind of holds some air. So you sort of use it to flip over and you trap some air, and you sort of use it as a bit of a flotation device, as well as your jacket. Now that was Marine Corps green at sea. Well, it would appear to me that if you're wearing Navy digicam and you fall off ship, and it's quite possible to do that, especially if you are, we've talked about earlier in the series, underway replenishment, and you're doing hoses, or you're doing things moving between ships, people out there hanging over the edge of things and working, that you can slip and fall into the ocean, and you can be, I don't know if perfectly fine, but very much in good shape. But the ships are traveling at a rate of knots, and they're not going to be able to turn around, and it's going to take a little while maybe to get the lifeboat drill to get the boat off, and they may, depending on their evolutions, they may have a standing by ready boat to go down, but it may take a few minutes to get that. You may be unconscious, you may not be, but still floating. But you're camouflaged in the sea. You see the problem there? Going to be hard to find if you need help. I don't see how that's good. I can only see it as a fashion sense thing. So, end of Camouflage Rant. Like I said, the Germans did it rather well, rather ahead of the rest of the world, and I think entirely without knowing, just that it seemed to look good and work fairly well, not the scientific setup that we determined things now. Okay. I hope you enjoy my rants. Proof carrier. Groups. Yeah, mentioning we got it, and I actually forgot about them. Yeah, that'll be good. Rebase to there, and these guys are way trapped. They're not that weak. Naval infantry, 2 battalions or 2 brigades worth. Still quite useful. Okay, we've lost. We're striking this large group. Now, I don't know if we've sunk anything, but we've certainly messed up a bunch of these destroyers. Of course, this just gives us the excuse to go back in. Okay, defense research report. Minor breakthrough. Good. Uh-oh. The French are rebelling. Let's send the SD up. We should be able to take care of it. The local Luftwaffe local Luftwaffe group gonna have trouble. I think it is gonna have trouble. No, and not that it shouldn't. It probably should have trouble. It's not designed to take on the partisans. Oh, what tech are we too far forward on? Oh, that was probably one from the... Yeah, single engine fighter prototype. See? That is because we got the boost from the research report. Okay, well. Let's research helicopters. Okay, we've won here. How's that? Require a new invasion, or can we just walk there? Okay, we can walk there. Some of these I think we can do that with. Oh, that is Tobago. Okay, I didn't know that they... Yeah, I thought they didn't have Tobago on there, so... So don't let anybody fool you about military in fashion. And I know things are changing with general modern fashion, of course. It ain't what it used to be. Obviously, but I would, you know, people often said, and again, maybe in just another rant of mine here, and it's going to be brief, that women are so fashion conscious and men aren't. Actually, it's the opposite, I would say. Men are more fashion conscious than women. And by this perspective, and again, things are changing, but traditionally men have worried more about fashion than women. But it's sort of in a different perspective in that you look at all men wearing dark suits, or wearing, if they're factory workers, wearing almost the exact same thing. Sure, the color of the shirt changes, or something, but they, traditionally have all looked the same. So they are much more fashion. None of them wanted to stand out. They all wanted to fit into the profile. Much more concerned about that than women. You don't see a guy wearing a purple suit to work. Now again, I think that would be ugly, but you don't see something else. And so it's just sort of, men have been sort of, but they're more conformist in their fashion than women. So, but they're very fashion conscious, and so the Army's, it's a fashion show. Like this flat core people here, we could talk about it, the fashion of them and the helmet styling. You think the German helmet looks the way it looks just because it's the best protective thing? It's also because it looks cool. And so, they get the proportions right so that it looks cool. Okay. A flat core was a massive anti-aircraft AA artillery formation employed by the Luftwaffe for anti-aircraft, anti-tank, and fire support operations in World War II. A flat core was a flexible organization. It was made up of varying brigades and divisions. Okay. It was eventually, okay. During the fighting in Normandy in 1944, the 3rd Flat Corps was motorized, although not all of the authorized vehicles were present. I'm absolutely sure of that without even knowing the details of this particular formation. It was eventually destroyed in the Ruhr pocket in April 1945. Sure, we'll take it. That looks fairly cheap. Now, since we talked about that and probably overrunning on time, Germany built lots of these anti-aircraft guns. This is, I think, maybe for a Fuhrer bunker or something here with all these fortifications here. Well, in the Fuhrer headquarters, that would say. So that was overdone by the Black Ice team. Way overdone. But they built lots of these, particularly around here, in the sense that they were mostly like we talked about the Flak 18, Flak 36s, and like the last event and sort of inspired this talk, said they didn't have enough transport. Well, the Luftwaffe units, and we've talked a little bit, and I was it Alexi's mod or whatever that was creating some Flak divisions that had garrison troops attached to it, which makes it incredibly slow, which isn't wrong in that sense, and it may not be wrong in the sense that the Luftwaffe troops with some of the Flak units wouldn't be proper fighting units, but garrison troops are just particularly slow and either need some motorization or something to speed them up, especially if you're going to use them for invading the Soviet Union. But so they were designed as static units. So much to the point is that everyone's familiar with the the 88mm Flak guns and the sort of legs that fold down, and there's 4 of them and they can rotate around on that whole and the pedestal that it stands on, that whole apparatus, as well as the 2 sets of wheels that attach to either side of that to make it mobile, but particularly even the legs for it, took considerable amount to build. Cost, time, whatever you want to say, materials even. It was easier to dig a bit of a hole, put in a steel piece and pour some concrete around it, and mount the Flak gun right there on that, and it wouldn't move. And then the troops obviously would be transported however to the location, and the ammunition would be transported however to the location, and that would vary from, if it's in the middle of the city right next to a railway, they probably came in on train and just walked off, and there it was, and they're defending a Flak gun or multiple Flak guns around a major railway station. If it was somewhere out in the countryside around a sort of a remote factory or something that they wanted to protect, obviously they probably drove them there in trucks and resupplied the ammunition in trucks as and when needed, but the truck was only available for duty once in a while because it was doing other things at other times, assigned whether to like Organization Todt or to the NSKK type units that we've seen, probably primarily like that, or just some other Luftwaffe manned trucks. Well, once they started losing territory, particularly here, because they didn't do too many, now around this, like, you know, they created Fortress Königsberg and a few other things like that. I'm sure around these places that may have had that, but there really wasn't nearly the effort of strategic bombing coming from Russia as there was coming across in this zone. So as they started to lose ground, including really near the beaches on back out, they had all these very valuable flak guns, and they also did include lighter 20s and 37 millimeter guns in this situation as well, that they just purely had to abandon, or they destroyed and abandoned, because they did not have, because you couldn't even like use the trucks like they said in not enough numbers to go pick up one flak gun and move it, then go pick up another flak gun and, you know, move them one at a time, because they were set in place and they didn't have, you know, the crane to lift it off, to move it, to put it on the flatbed thing, to whatever, however they got it there. They just didn't have the ability to move them out of the way, so they lost tons of flak guns, as well as the ammunition that they stored there that they couldn't move away, that would have really effectively manned, you know, something like the Siegfried line again, with a lot more anti-tank guns, if nothing else, that they just really lost. So cheapness at one stage meant, you know, critical losses of equipment, and you had guys that were trained as decent flak gunners, but not as okay, well, he's got it right place finally, okay, but not as ground troops. I'll click there. We'll see where we use them. So that the troops became near useless because they're no longer manning guns that they were trained to do. I just wish, well, I like the idea of provincial AA, but I also sort of like the idea that heavy AA in mobile units could also defend provinces, but I don't know that that'll ever be the case. Okay, you can have some supplies. Well, I think it's time, like I said, probably over time for us to end this episode. Excuse me. Thanks for watching. Thanks for liking the videos. Do appreciate that. Please post your comments, and truly, if you guys got some more details that I've slipped up on, post links to it. I do appreciate it's value added. I know most of you just watch these episodes once and never come back for the discussions that do continue on, and some episodes for quite some time between me and a few participants. But I do look at this series as sitting on YouTube and being sort of my best series of covering Germany in Hearts of Iron 3 with Black Ice 8 for, you know, ever. You know, is my best effort, shall we say. Not the best series ever necessarily, but my best effort. And so it's going to sit there, and even though at some point we're going to move on to Hearts of Iron 4, the announced date, and it's very soft. Trust me, guys. If you guys thinking that it's at around D-Day time, June 6th, if you think that's any sort of hard date, don't. I knew about that date since about the first of the year, and I couldn't say anything. I don't even know if I should say that I knew about it beforehand, but that was like around about the first of the year. That was Johan's earlier estimation, but I guess there was pressure to give a date because they were giving a Stellaris date, but you could tell that he was really reluctant in the press conference to give that date out because he knows it may slip. And that's why they said around D-Day and not a particular time date. I mean, I'm sure they would love to, you know, they would hold up the release a week or something just to have it on June 6th to coincide with D-Day. But it's a very soft date as to when it's going to happen. It's not any sort of hard date, but so literally on the very first day, unless I get permission beforehand, on the first day I will have Hearts of Iron 4 content coming out. with my thoughts on it, and I'll have lots of thoughts on it, trust me, by that time. Um, but I do think that this series will stand the test of time, and I hope to be interest to people, even if they're no longer playing this game, and just that this is an interesting series. So your comments, your additives of, just I don't necessarily have time to go in and look up all the Wikipedia links to different weapon sites, and I'm not offended if I get talking about a pack 41 and it's really a pack 44 or something like that. If I make the mistake, I'm happy to have you correct it. So if you guys hear me slipping up on that, please post the correct stuff, and preferably just for everybody's use, not just to back up your story, but just for everybody's use if they want to look into it in future to have, I know I said I was ending this, I'm still talking. If they want to look up more details on it, they'll easily be able to find it in the description. So I do appreciate that. See you next time.